Competition, inclusion, and gameplay. These terms buzz annoyingly in a developer's head as they attempt to make a PC shooter viable to as many computer builds as possible. From the battle station beasts to the 10-year-old laptops. Often they try to match up as much as possible across all the graphic settings, but this often isn't an easy give technically. If you aren't accustomed to it already, buckle your seatbelts as we take a tour of Planetside 2, Potato Mode. If you didn't know already, in Planetside 2, there are graphical settings you can change outside of the in-game menu. DA Baddie, also known as Sazzy Pants on YouTube, contacted me with his guide to the INI setup, which is a file found inside the Planetside 2 folder. His intention was to spread the word on how you can play the game even on the most limited hardware, so if you or someone you know has trouble playing the game, you might want to follow his step-by-step guide, which will be linked here or in the description depending on whether or not you're on mobile. He also prompted me to take a further look into the difference between settings in the game, how they might make somebody more competitive, and what moral quandaries there might be. So why do people play with lower graphical settings? Well, most will have hardware incapable of running the game on high or ultra, and while striving to get the game looking as good as possible, will lower their settings to the point where the game becomes playable for them. Planetside 2 is played all over the world, and even in countries with varying wealth, and my guess is the majority of players would like to play ultra with 60 FPS or higher, but that just isn't possible. Then there is the camp who wants the game to run as smoothly as possible, as they have high-end gaming monitors and want to get the FPS in the 3 figures. Some people get motion sickness from low frame rates, and some are just enthusiasts that are turned on by high numbers. Whatever floats your boat, hey. Then there's a bunch that want to have the smoothest FPS possible, so they don't have any drops, input lag, and have as much of an advantage as possible when it comes to performance and gameplay. And others that do it to gain the visual advantage of having less clutter on the screen, and thus being more competitive that way. I could see lower settings also being more accessible to people with visual impairments, because clutter and more features may make it harder to make out targets. I want to put it out there that this is no witch hunt, and realistically I'd rather have more players in the game and make it so lower end machines weren't out of the running. For the most part, the differences in settings are small, and I didn't perform noticeably much better when playing in lower settings, but that is hard to quantify. To a certain degree, Planetside 2 keeps the settings fairly consistent across the modes. However, as you get to the lower end, foliage becomes thinner or non-existent, shadows don't obscure players, and models become very simple and defined, which are small advantages that lower settings brings. However, in ultra settings the infiltrator cloak is more visible, which is one advantage to playing on higher settings. The one glaring problem with editing the INI file is that you can change whether or not to see particle effects. This turns off your muzzle flash, almost all tracers, recon darts, explosions, and the touchy one, smoke effects. Generally speaking, not seeing the clutter of explosions and muzzle flash makes it easier to aim and pick out targets. After playing with it myself, I don't believe it is a huge advantage, but it definitely helps picking out your targets from foliage and cover. Also, it comes with its disadvantages. Firstly, often it will be hard to pinpoint where you're being shot from, as there is limited tracer trails to go off, and it's also hard to fire dumbfire rockets because you usually not use the smoke trail as a visual guide to readjust your shots. Also, you don't know whether a tank is shelling close to you or not without getting the explosion indicator, so it isn't completely a one-sided change to make. The smoke effects, however, 100% give the advantage to the player with particles disabled. It means that any smoke push or smoked off base will blind everyone else, but the no particle player will be able to see it all. In my NS Auto Pistol video, there was a push from the ground where hundreds of TR pushed through smoke. Not very visible to me, but above was a player who could see through it all. To be fair, neither of us got many kills because it was quite chaotic, and, well, it did actually create quite a lot of drama on the Planetside 2 subreddits. You do have to take into consideration though that by spotting targets through smoke, you're effectively making them visible to you, so you can always just spam Q whenever you see a smoke cloud go up. However, there is still undeniably an advantage to the player who can see through it, being able to target the head with a clear shot, which is normally something only possible when using a thermal sight, which has sway and only goes to 1x zoom, which is something that you'd take to counter this utility, and as I said, comes with some downsides. Matthias, who was a PS2 YouTuber, did a video about why H1Z1 couldn't be competitive because of gameplay inconsistencies and setting inconsistencies, so it got me thinking about the same with Planetside 2. Being able to turn off smoke through a setting does thwart any smoke tactics, and for example in CSGO the smoke is forced across all settings. And more generally, if you watch players who play Farmers League or any competitive Planetside 2 streams, you will see them using lower settings. And in the case of these players, I think it is less the gaming rig and more for the advantages you get when playing in lower settings. Although this is true of Counter-Strike even, with players using lower resolutions to get larger heads as targets and effectively more zoom. Players that want to play something competitively will want to take any advantage they can get, and those that aren't will play the game to the limits of their desires, and the hardware. Perhaps this will never be settled completely on the PC platform, but what we do have is choice. Maybe console players will see this as their one advantage, but that is up to them. So whilst there may be advantages to lowering your settings with a high-end rig, I'm a graphics buff. I enjoy the beauty of Araxis too much to play this way, and thus will continue playing on high to ultra mode. At the end of the day, it is a choice, but what developers need to look at is how to fix smokes. Some way of doing it without too much of a performance hit, otherwise they are rendered completely useless by a settings change, and with the particles looking at how much of a performance hit they may have and whether or not they can be tweaked too. I'm not sure whether DBG will give this much thought, but hey, it was an interesting topic and quite interesting to design choices when making a shooter game. So what do you all prioritize, looks or performance, and what settings do you play on at the moment? Anyway, I'm hoping to get my Planetside 2's 25 quick tips done by Thursday, and to have a question and answer out this Monday or Tuesday. If you enjoyed the content, give it a thumbs up. If you thought it was too pixelated, give it a dislike, and subscribe for the next episode. Until next time everybody, Joshino.